Welcome to episode 33 of The Martial Truth. This will be my series of interviews with Sensei Patrick McCarthy, a longtime friend and someone who's been into my school a couple of times to do seminars on the Bubishi. We'll be covering a large range of topics and different historical martial arts things, and obviously talking about his new book, which just came out on Kian Chotoku. All right. For my Isshin-Ryu friends, obviously the teacher of the founder of our style, Tatsuo Shimabuku. Okay. So a couple of things on McCarthy Sensei, prolific author. Choki Motobu, fantastic book. The two books covering Taira Shinken. I mean, again, fantastic. These are all in my library. Legend of the Fist. All right. We have obviously the biggie, the Bubishi. I mean, anybody that studies Okinawan karate, if this isn't in your library, I don't know what you're waiting for. Okay. We have other books that he's translated. Tales of Okinawa's Great Masters, Shoshin Nagamine, another fantastic book. Tampenshu, Many Stories on Gichin Funakoshi, another excellent read. All right. His original classical kata of Okinawan karate by Patrick McCarthy. All right. And then the new book that we're going to be talking about during these interviews is Kensei Kian Chotoku, The Man and His Art. Outstanding read. If you're, again, a student of Okinawan karate and want to know what was going on in the early days of karate and how karate has changed, excellent book. Couldn't recommend it more. Down in the bottom, in the description, there'll be a link to purchase the book from Amazon. All right, highly recommend it. Before we go any further, please consider becoming a member of the channel. All right, helps to support us to be able to do different things. Also, please, again, this interview series, if you enjoy them, click that like. Please share the videos, share them wherever you can, share them with friends. All right, it again helps the channel with the YouTube algorithms, and really appreciate it. And subscribe if you're not a subscriber. Please subscribe. Again, that also helps our channel to move forward. We just surpassed 12,000 subscribers. All right, and who knew back then in 2009 how the channel would grow? All right, and it's people seem to like it and want to keep it going. So, without further ado, Patrick McCarthy. So, welcome to the podcast, Sensei, the Martial Truth Podcast. I'm honored to have Sensei Patrick McCarthy on with me. We're going to talk about a whole bunch of things, hopefully, and we're going to talk about his new book, Kian Chotoku, A Man and His Art. All right, Sensei, welcome to the podcast.
Mike Calandra, Sensei, my goodness, it's absolutely wonderful to see you. It's funny, coming up to this, I was thinking, when was the last time I was at your dojo? Was it the time so we got to the dojo early in the morning?
Right.
And then by the time it was, we couldn't get up because there was so much snow up against the door.
Right.
Was that the
Yeah. So that was one of the last times you were there. We were driving through the streets, and it was a nightmare. And we had for a while where we had a few teachers come in for seminars where every time one of them came in, we got hit with massive snow. But everybody showed up. It didn't hurt the seminars. Right?
Yeah, no, I was absolutely fantastic. What remarkable spirit. That's the one thing I love about New York. And growing up as a kid in Toronto,
right.
I don't know how many times I drove across the line, upstate, Syracuse, Rochester, the Valley, downtown, it's just, and it seems that, you were going into an extremely, completely different culture when I went across the line. But when I drove down into the city, man, that, back in the day, I mean, yeah, I remember 73, 74. I remember coming out of Madison Square Gardens in 74 when the first Shaolin Wushu team came, and going over to Urban's dojo and Chinatown and Wai Hong's place and some of the I wanted to say tournament, but they were friggin' battles.
Yeah.
Battle.
Yeah. No, back then it was very different. Back then it was very different. So,
And how are you? Nice to see you.
listen, I'm great. I've been out in Arizona now. Just hit 3 years. We've been in the new house 2.5 years. We love it out here. So
So
it's
how's retired life?
look,
You're
I've been
busier now
retired
than
from
you
the
ever were.
well, I retired from the police department. April will be 16 years, but the dojo in New York was going 7 days a week. So it's not like
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
retired.
yeah,
I was going to London every year until COVID hit. I'll start going to
yeah.
London again next year, teaching there. I've been traveling around a lot teaching, so it's been
Yeah,
great. I
yeah.
mean, out here, what
Hey,
I did
I
was,
wonder how many. I wonder how many of your viewers know that you were not just a New York City transit cop.
right,
You had become bodyguard slash driver
right.
for both. It was you were both for both senators, wasn't it? Was it
Well,
Chuck
no,
Schumer?
it was just for Senator Schumer, who's now now he's the majority
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
in the
Well, come
Senate.
on, how many times Hillary Clinton?
Oh, I listen. I know
I
them
don't even want to
all.
hear the stories. But
Yeah, I know them all. I did that for 5.5 years. I retired a second grade detective.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
so the job was very good to me. I enjoyed my time there, but I was very happy once I retired. What I did out here was I had a building built. I have an acre and a quarter out here, so I had a building built and turned it into my home dojo, which I'm sitting in right now as we're recording this. And I'm not looking to have the same amount of students that I had in New York.
Yeah,
I teach 3 days a week. I do some other stuff. The YouTube channel's really busy for me, and I'm also doing a lot of Zoom classes for different people around the world. So there's a lot going on.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I saw you just had a big thing on Okinawa, right?
Oh my goodness! What's the expression? Be careful what you dream for, wish for. So after relocating here, I was in Los Angeles for it was kind of a 5 year plan to be in LA.
Right.
We cut it short. Things didn't quite go the way they wanted, and we wanted to get in Okinawa 3 years earlier than we had planned on it. And unfortunately, it was still the pandemic. So
Right.
we really couldn't do anything where it was a kind of crowd gathering unless
Right.
it was online.
Right.
And so this had been in the plans for quite a while. And actually, we were going to do it last year, but it became obvious to us that we need a good full year of advertisement and preparation to make it work. So we said, let's do it next year. Let's
Right.
stop us around. And we really carefully planned it out well. And it was a 10-day event. The actual Gashik was 4 days, 21st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. And of course, the next day was Karate Nohi, the Karate Day, which of course we participated in. And Sensei James Pankwich always holds his a 100 kata challenge on that particular day as well. We were at Shuri Castle for that. And then on the next day, we had beach barbecues. We had, Kokusai Dori, Main Street, again, lined up from the Kensho all the way right down to the very end. Now, this year wasn't, which is kind of strange and unusual because this year for Tsunehiki, the big Naha tug of war,
Right.
there were crowd breaking 280,000 people compared to say 220 last year. So we thought the Kokusai Dori would be overwhelming, and the numbers we got were around 2,400. And the Guinness Book of Records was, I think it was 3,600 the year that was done. I think it was 2018 or 19.
Okay.
So, but look, it was a full-on week. We had just absolutely incredible. It was an incredible experience. About 156 participants from 26 countries, and not just our group. There were, our group. There were folks from all over. We welcomed everybody. And I think the nice part about that was that folks could come, and not just for our specialty was out, which is the application practices for content, and not style based. But then they could go over to their style dojo and train or participate in various functions and stuff like that. So, and my goodness, I'm sitting we're at the Okinawa Karate Kaikan, and I'm sitting there, and somebody said, "Oh, there's somebody at the door to see him." Around. My God, it's Karekaru Toru. Is a very, very well-known historian, author, researcher, and my total respect to this gentleman. He's responsible for so much of the research. In fact, he's the guy who was responsible for the identification of the Itoso Anko photograph.
Okay.
I hope you'll ask me about that later in the interview.
Okay.
How that all happened, because a lot of folks, I'm not sure folks understand how that.
I still think there's a lot of confusion on that. I think because I'm constantly seeing things come up online. I know kind of what happened, but I mean, you can talk about.
Okay, look, I don't know how much time we have, but
we got as much time as you want.
Okay, Thatcher and the pantheon of dignitaries and luminaries who showed up, which is boom, and then of course at the very end, with all these guys there to get presented with Hanshi Judah.
I was going to bring that up too, because I literally only found out about it the other day.
Completely over. But anyway, we'll go back to the so as you know, coming up through the traditional karate, my principal traditional teacher was Richard Kim from Zen Butokai. Right. And whatever else is known about Richard Kim, he was to us, the walking rendition of God at one time. The Harvard professor of karate, and you look at, irrespective of what went on between he and I over the years, I still have nothing but the utmost respect for him, and very rarely do I meet anybody who comes up to his standard with regards to knowledge and insight and so on. But okay, that's the story. And of course, Kinja Hiroshi, who was not just, I suppose, a mentor to Richard Kim, but also a good friend and a colleague and a peer back in the day. So the point being that I had some very good, let's say, impeccable lineage when it comes to traditional Okinawan karate, right? So Kinjo Sensei, as he was getting older, had discovered, look at. And last time I saw him in person was at his 88th birthday Beiju celebration in Tokyo, and but I mean, there wasn't a week that went by where we weren't talking or on the telephone or something. But he got to the point where he realized, look, he's not going to last. He's in his mid-90s, and he's now an extremely meticulous person. He realized I want to get rid of my library. Library. 35 or 3,600 books, documents, and being the consummate research journalist that he was, in addition to his karate kobudo. And look, he met and trained with everybody. He also put the very first karate magazine cover out there in 1947. Issue 2 would be Konishi Yasuhiro and Maburi Kenma. He was, not just a fan of, but had met, interviewed, talked to, and trained under Org. And one thing I love about Kinjo Sensei was, he told me when he trained under Motobu Choki, he'd say, I am not his student. I painfully remember enjoying several lessons under him. Today, if I go to a seminar, it's in the mindset, right? If I say let's say I went to one of your seminars and you taught me something, anything, and then I said, I really like that. And let's say that I went then and I taught that, but I didn't mention your name.
Right.
I would be attacked by everybody and his brother. Oh, that's my Calandra psychotic. You got to,
Right.
And so on the other hand, so I have become so sensitive over the years to this. Every time I teach something that came from another source, I cite it and make sure that it's.
So let me just stop you here, because you'll find this quite funny. So when you came in all those years ago, obviously my main interest was in the Bubishi, right? And Nepai, Haporen, Rakan Ken, right? But then we also did other stuff. You introduced me to Katori Shinto-Ryu, introduced me to Sugino Sensei. I'm still training with Sugino to this day. So,
we're both Chen Tai Chi stylists.
Both Chen Tai Chi stylists, But the one drill you taught us, right, which is, kakie, right? Bicep bumps. Okay, right. We still call that the McCarthy drill.
Oh, yeah.
So it's funny, right? So I'll say, even here out in this dojo now, I'm teaching it, and I'll say, all right, work the McCarthy drill. And nobody, like, especially because most of them here are beginners, they don't even know who you are, right? But I say, oh, he's a very famous guy, an author, and everything. And it's just funny that we still, and other drills that I picked up from different teachers, I will still refer to. A lot of times I'll call them, the McCarthy drill, the Tayani drill, whatever it is.
I'll tell you where I learned how to. I actually learned it from Wally J. Professor Wally J. was someone who said to me a long time ago. He said, he's bad. And I would say things to him like, I'd say, he says they, and I hosted him many times.
Right. I met him, a phenomenal individual.
Surrogate grandfather for my kids and stuff like that, and brought him to Japan. His lifetime dream was come to the Bitoku-den. But I'd say, Sensei, I thought you taught me this drill in Hawaii on your 50th. I said, but we did it this way. He goes, yeah. I said, isn't this much better? I went, yeah. He goes, let's do it this way. And I went, okay, yeah. He said, remember, he always said, why fight World War III with World War II weapons? He said, right. And some. Anyway, I got to be careful because I don't want to get off track here. And so we're talking about the Itosu Anko photograph issue. So anyway, Sensei had between 3,000 and 4,000 books and documents and photographs and stuff like that. And so anyway, he had this one photograph, which is the one, I'll just say it's the one that was misidentified as Itosu Anko, right? So he says to me, he goes, I'm sending you this copy of this photograph. And he'd sent me, by the way, at around that time, oh gosh, dozens of documents, and many of which I still have here.
Okay.
And yeah, you still get to translate. But the ones that had caught my attention right off the bat were the Okinawa Times Ryukyu Shimpo 1913 to about 1934 articles by several different people. There was the Funagoshi Gitsu stuff before he got to the mainland and stuff. And of course the new ones, which are the discovery of the Itosu Anko photograph. So he said to me, I'm sorry, let me make the point. So the photograph had been established that this was Itosu Anko, and for the next 13 years, this bald-headed guy with a big, thick white mustache became Itosu Anko, and nobody questioned it at all. And it was in, it's in the Okinawa Karate Koburo Jiten. It's hanging on the walls all over the world, here in Okinawa as well. And a lot of these guys are not on social media and stuff like that, right? So anyway, we're going along, and all of a sudden, this other guy, and I'll give all the names in a minute. This other guy, who's also a PhD candidate, and being mentored under the guy who identified Itosu in the first place. Okay. And he goes, hey, I just discovered something. This guy is not Itosu Anko. And it's discovered that he's actually a guy named, he's a guy from Kagoshima, had been a soldier who had fought in both the 1894-95 China War and then the 1904-05 Russia-Japan War. And he'd been medaled and he was a hands-on soldier, and well known for his bayonet skills and as a juke. In those days, it called Juken Jutsu, like Jukendo instructor, bayonet instructor. So he'd been hired from Kagoshima to go down to Okinawa and work in the school system. Remember Judo Kendo. This is coming up into a period of which would ultimately become a period of radical military escalation. Right. And Japan's heavy nationalism focus on preparing students in school for their conscription time, and so he would have been, from the physical education point of view, he would have been a well-known, I don't want to say celebrity, but certainly worthy of being in all those photographs. And so now we discover his name is actually Miyake Sango, Jukendo teacher and so on. Now, so let me back up a little bit to the photograph, okay? So Kincho Sensei says, I got that photograph from my old school best friend. And when I was a child in Shuri Elementary School, or first middle school, I got this photograph from a guy, many years later, of course, and his name was Tokura Anshu. And Tokura Anshu, the name might ring a bell because that's the son of Tokura Ambun. While Kinjo Hiroshi had many teachers, as did many during the day, it was very popular to do that. His 4 principal teachers were Hanashiro Chomo, Gusukuma Shimpan, Tokura Ambun, and Oshiro Chojo. And of course, Oshiro Chojo died quite early in life. And Oshiro Chojo was known, in addition to karate skills from Itosu Anko, as a very, very handy man with a bow and saw, actually. And he was what Chinen Sanda's actually most prominent student. And every year down here in Chinen, Shiki Yanaka, he would present the boko, Shiki Yanaka no Bo, for their annual Matsuri festival. But he died early, and Kinjo says he would later go on to train with his brother and another guy named Maeshiro Chotoku. But that's for another time. So Anshu says to my sensei, my dad told me that he thinks Itosu Anko is in this group photograph, and it's I remember he said a big, in Japanese they use the word shiro ago hige, and shiro is white, like akashiro, white, right, and ago means your chin, hige means like a beard, a mustache, but that way, back in those days, having those big huge mustaches was very, very trendy,
right?
And so as you see the photograph, he's bald head, the big white mustache, and he's wearing the traditional clothing. And Anshu says to my sensei, to Kinjo sensei, he goes, Itosu was kind of a rugged man, always and only ever wore traditional garment, the kimono.
Right.
Had very little hair and had this big white, aguiga.
Right.
So if you look at the original photograph, there's only one guy in there who looks like that.
Right.
So Kinjo sensei says, I don't want to, I got to get a check. Let me get a check that with somebody who knows more about historical documentation than I do. He sends it to Okinawa, and the guy who was the curator at the museum at the time, who was responsible for authenticating historical documents, was a guy named Kade Karutoru. Kade Karutoru, in addition to being the PhD and working in that particular field, was also karate man, Goju Styles, who was just at my event here the other day.
Okay.
So and look, armed with the same information that I just told you, he looked at the documents as well. He said, you could turn the photograph around. There wasn't any documentation on the back.
There's nothing on it, right?
And the original photograph, which I had taken to a photographic specialist to fix the scar in the face and stuff, or the rip in the face. The original photo actually had a big
tear in it.
Okay, tear in it. Yeah. Anyway, so based on these facts, Kadekaro made a deduction, let's call it, and the deduction was that this must be Itosu Anko by virtue of the fact there's nobody else in the photograph. Somebody who trained with Itosu Anko told his son this, who told it to sensei, and therefore, so we all went, wow, fantastic. And I started. And it was released first here in Japan, and I did it.
It was a big deal.
It was a
big deal.
Funny because it's funny because of all the critiques and the detractors and what value is this? And McCarthy this and that. So anyway, we went on and for the next 13 years. Now, so let's just stop for a moment. Let's pretend for a moment that this guy, Miyagi-Sango, who was identified incorrectly as Itosu, let's say he was not identified, okay? Just hold the stuff around. Let's just say it just went by and nobody knew anything about a white beard. And it was just another photograph that was thrown into the pile and is over in the Naha Central Library. So nobody would have known the difference, and nobody would have been, and life would just go on. And maybe if we were lucky one day down the road, somebody else might discover Itosu Anko. But because that guy was identified as Itosu Anko. Now later, the next understudy, whose name is Nakamura Akira, and again, a bright, young, intelligent, discerning, meticulous researcher here in Okinawa, who's responsible for doing the same job that Karakara Toro was going through documents one day, and he picks up this photograph and goes, wait, I know that guy. That's Itosu Anko. Turns the photograph around, and on the back of the photograph, there's like these little silhouettes.
Right.
With numbers on them. And then down at the bottom, there's a legend that says, this is so-and-so, this is John Doe, that's Harry Smith. And oh gosh, look, number 7. Wait. It doesn't say Itosu. It doesn't say Itosu Anko. It says Miyake Sango. Wow. Oops, there has been an error. Now, rather than, in Western culture, what would you do? And I love what is it, Einstein's quote about, if we knew what we were doing in the first place, it wouldn't be called research,
Right.
And Maya Angelou, she's got a wonderful quote I love. I did then what I knew, and when I knew more, I did better. So who would have known, right? So the guy comes out and rather than say something like, "Look, folks, back in the day when we were doing the research, this is what we had available. This son of a student of Itosu Anko told his son that Itosu Anko might have been in his photograph, and it's a group photograph out in front of Shuri Middle School, and I mean everything fits, time frames and so on, but they just didn't get the whole picture. And now." So then no one else discovered. I mean, it wasn't like, oh, and down at the other end
Right.
is Itosu Anko.
Right.
It's just this guy's discovered not to be Itosu Anko.
Right.
So rather than come back and say, look, I'm sorry, we made a mistake. Based on what we had, we assumed this guy was it. But now we realize it's not him because, oh, here's the name. It's somebody else. So now that we know that this is not Itosu Anko, and by this time, a lot of other sources had become available here over the years. Ryugun 21 is very popular, and it continues to be a popular site here in Okinawa. There's another the Naha City Digital Archives are another one, which are I discovered again many years ago and shared with a lot of folks out there who are, and we found a half a dozen other photographs with Miyagi Sango in it.
Okay.
So up on Kagoshima, and remember, during what they call the Heian camp, in the Meiji Restoration, which is 1868, it took some time before the Meiji administrators were able then to facilitate the transition of the Ryukyu kingdom. So that's why. And then of course they got the mandate in 1872, 4 years later, and then it wasn't until really 1879 that.
Again, that makes sense. That's one of the interesting things in the Keon book, the political goings on, right? That caused.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
But
I can't wait to talk. Let me just finish this off with the Itosu thing. We'll move along. So anyway, the point of being is Mombusho is the Ministry of Education, and at that time, the turn of the century, Okinawa's school system had fallen under the jurisdiction of Kagoshima, and it was, I think his name was Ogura Shintaro was the director at the time, chairman at the time, and so it's not unusual then that we would now find photographs up in Kagoshima from Okinawa back in the day, and that's exactly what happened. So now they don't make this perfectly clear. What is clear is that we discovered that Itosu Anko was misdiagnosed. Sorry, he was misidentified.
Right.
And we now know that he's Miyagi Sango, Jukendo teacher from Kagoshima. So in the photograph that they discovered, it wasn't obvious that the other guy was Itosu Anko. That's another photograph.
Right.
And now you get this, mid 1905 and 1908 photograph of teachers and students out in front of the school, And if there's a foreign in it, there's some interesting. And over on the second row in the left, buried way down in the back, you can see Miyagi Sango. You can see him.
Right.
And then over on the right side, and by the way, we're going to talk about how I made all this color and stuff like that later.
Right.
But it's so over here on the right side, enclosed in a box,
Right.
is another guy quietly sitting there with a white Shiro Ago Hige, not just a mata, but a Shiro Ago, not very much hair on the top, dressed in a kimono, and looking pretty rugged. And based upon our understanding of the situation, it had been deduced, if this guy's not in, these are the time frames, that's the school, that's got to be Ito's uncle.
Right.
So before jumping the gun and making a decision, let's pass that around. Let's see if everybody in academia can jump on it. Let's see if all of it. And of course, I mean, keep in mind that for 13 years, the guys who were in the powers that be all thought that the other guy was married, including me, including everybody. We all did,
Right.
And so, end result is we found out this is Ito's uncle. And so, as I was alluding to, why didn't somebody just come on and say that? Hey, guys, it's research. You do what you can with what you got, and if later something else happens, that's a good. So, had we not had Katakara not made a mistake, and so what? That's not a bad thing.
Right? No.
You going with it. We wouldn't have never been able to identify that the other guy now was Ito's uncle. So in many ways, misidentifying or incorrectly identifying him is how we got to identify Ito's uncle. So it was win-win all the way around. And I can't help but smile in many ways when I listen to the donkeys out there and
Well, I'll just say that I'm in my 46th year now. And, I don't get crazy with the history, but I obviously am fascinated with the history. And anytime something comes out where, we've identified something or, like your book that you just came out with, Keon, there's a lot of stuff in there, the interview with the guy in Hawaii who studied with Keon for 12 years. I mean, that was probably my favorite chapter in the book. Right. Yeah. But, it's just, to me, it's just, again, take everything else away. It's interesting. It's an interesting, if you're into the martial arts, again, I want to see, I'd love to see a photo of Itosu. I'd love to see a photo of this guy, of that guy, I'd love to see a video.
There's been some wonderful research done since that by my colleague and dear friend, also Isshin-Ryu stylist, Joe Swift,
right,
who wrote about Ito's uncle, the savior.
This ends part one of my interview series with Patrick McCarthy sensei. All right. In future interviews, we'll take a deep dive into the Keon book. Okay, his new book. All right, which I urge everybody to purchase. There'll be a link in the description section. All right, we will go take a deep dive into that. Talk about Keon's relationship with Isshin-Ryu and Tatsuo Shimabuku, and just many other subjects that McCarthy Sensei will talk about. So hope you enjoyed it. Please click that like and share button. Subscribe if you're not a subscriber. Consider becoming a member of the channel. And I'll see you in the next podcast. Thanks. Bye.